Hi and welcome back. In this video, I'm going to explain the new audio engine. I'm going to show you how to set it up, how to choose the mode, and also demonstrate the difference between the new and the old audio engine. The new audio engine definitely has some benefits. First of all, let's just go to the settings. On the settings tab, on the advanced page, you'll find right here where it says experimental. And then this selection right here, enable experimental engine processing. So this is labeled experimental because this is the first time that this underlying technology has been changed in Waveform, and then this release 11.5 is the first time it's been out in the general base of users. So it's still a little bit new, and after users have more time on this, this will become the standard. Now when you turn this on, you'll see that there is a processing algorithm signaling real-time hybrid, semaphore, lightweight semaphore, and hybrid. Now I'm going to cut to the chase. You're going to want to set this to hybrid semaphore. What we see here is the evolution of the engine as it was developed. The most testing that I did in the beta testing phase was using the hybrid engine, and then these were stepping stones up to the hybrid semaphore. For the vast majority of you, you're going to want to set this to hybrid semaphore. Don't worry about it beyond that. If you have a system and you want to do some comparison or do some benchmarking with these engines, feel free to do that. I think that traction developers would really appreciate that. The one to focus on besides that would be hybrid. So there is a slight advantage to the hybrid semaphore, but it might be worthwhile to test. I don't find a whole lot of difference between these on my system. However, set that to hybrid semaphore. This has removed bypass plugins from playback for reduced latency. Typically, you probably would want this on because it actually reduces calculating the latency of bypass plugins. The only downside of that is that there might be a slight, almost imperceptible delay with the transport controls if you have it set that way. I have not found that to be the case. Now, there's one other setting on this page that is use 64-bit mass when mixing. This has been in here for ages, but what it does is it uses a higher range when mixing. I can leave this on all the time on my systems. Actually, for years, I've always left this on. I can't tell any CPU difference between them. However, if you're really under a lot of stress with your system and you want to try to optimize it, you could turn that off. I think most modern computers will work just fine with this turned on. You'll also notice CPU cores is something you can manipulate while you're benchmarking if you want to deliberately reduce the performance to see the impact of the different engines. Sometimes I'll cut my CPU cores in half to see a bigger impact of different tests that I'm doing. You'll see that I have my core set to 10 where the maximum is 12. Well, there's a reason for that, and the reason is that I'm screencasting while doing these demos, and I found that it's a little more stable if I reduce 2 cores and allow the operating system and my screencasting software a little bit of CPU to work with. All right, so let's get back to this. Plug-in delay compensation. If I go to a normal project here, so when you have plugins, like I have the R compressor, I have Waves Ultra Maximizer, those things take a few milliseconds, 1 or 2 milliseconds to process. You can see the processing latency of different plugins by clicking on the meter up here. This is the CPU usage meter, and when it opens, if you click on the latency column, then you can see the latency of different plugins. Now, something like a mastering plugin, like Ozone in this case, has very high latency, meaning from the time the audio comes in, it is going to take 175 milliseconds. That's almost 0.2 of a second, which is a very audible delay. So if, when you're mixing, you put that on some tracks and not others, audio, as it comes together in the final mix, would be way out of sync. and that would be very obvious. So standard plug-in delay compensation will delay tracks that don't have something like this. It will look at the track, like this track here, with the most latency, and it will delay all the other ones till it lines up. That's what plug-in delay compensation is all about. Back in the old days, 15 years ago, we had to figure this out manually and put in little delay plugins in order to make things line up. Modern software, this is built in, and this is one of the things that's been dramatically improved with this new engine. So that's the explanation for that, and that's how you can see. Now, this is a very simple example. Early users have reported they can hear the difference. I believe that I can hear the difference. I will play a little segment of this drum mix with both engines, and you can see if you can hear a difference. It's really, really subtle, and in a video you might not pick it up. First of all, we'll disable this engine. I'll go back to this mix and I'll play it. So it's unlikely that you'll hear a huge difference. People with really good ears who are really in tune with this can tell. What you'll get, especially if you have buses set up, is less phase smearing because the calculation is going to be right on and very accurate with this new engine. Now, there are certain circumstances where it is significantly improved, and so I'm going to show you that now. So this is a benchmark for plug-in delay compensation and an important test case for the new audio engine. And the way this works is we have an audio clip. It's playing into a track with an aux send. And here this aux send is being sent to bus 1, and then it's returned right here on the second track. So this is sent from here if you want to duplicate this. Then we set up another aux. And the way you do these auxes, if you just as an aside here, is you insert them as a plugin. So you would do add plugin to left, waveform utility, and then here are your aux sends and returns. And the dialog boxes for them allow you to assign them to different buses or even name those buses. That's not the point of this video, but anyway, this aux send then goes to this aux return. So we have a kind of a cascade of aux sends and returns. So this can cause a notable gap in delay compensation as you're feeding one thing into the other, and this is pretty audible. I'm going to turn off the new engine. We'll rewind and listen to this. All right, well, there's a kind of a phasing. Now, you haven't heard the difference, but we'll enable the experimental engine or the new engine. And now listen. So what's happening here is that all of these are playing out to the mix, but it's getting delayed. It's getting delayed a little bit here and a little bit more here, and so you get this kind of a phasing quality. So this is solved with the new engine. Regardless of the complexity of your routing, it should always be accurately calculating those delays. The other thing is that this also goes into the rack environment. If you have racks, this is the vocal psycho effect. You can see that we've got routing every which way in here, and these could be replaced with any plugins that have larger or smaller delay compensation. And the old engine did not handle these perfectly, but the new engine should handle these correctly regardless of the complexity of your rack setup. So the bottom line is with the new engine, plug-in delay compensation should be correct and in sync in any situation. Now, there are two other concepts related to the audio engine that have been optimized. One of them is throughput. The new audio engine lowers CPU usage, And in my testing, it lowers it about 20%. That means you can get more tracks, more plugins, or more instruments using the same computer, so the CPU usage is lower, and that's called throughput. The other idea is jitter. Jitter is the idea that the CPU usage spikes, and when you get a CPU spike, then you can get dropouts, glitches, and things like underruns. Whatever technically is happening, it sounds like some kind of a glitch, pop or gap in the audio, and you really don't want that. In the design of an audio engine, you're trying to get better throughput, which is to lower the CPU usage, but allow smoother playback at the higher CPU rates. So if you really are loading the system and you're at 70% CPU usage, you still don't want it to drop out or glitch suddenly. You want that confidence that you're going to get clean playback even when you're pushing your system. So we want to move that range of glitching higher in CPU usage. Kind of as you get closer to the red line, you want less glitching. Overall CPU usage to be lower. So I want to show you an example of how you can try to calculate that. So I've created a project here. This is based on the band recording template. And you can see that I have created an example where it's just really causing the CPU to spike up there around 70%. Now, enable the experimental engine. And we've got about 60% CPU, so we've lowered it 18 or 20%. So here's another way that you can set up a benchmark. One is to open the 2-bits demo project, which has fairly high CPU for a demo project. And on my system, I'm getting about 7% CPU usage. If you look right up in the corner, that number. So then if you open the tracks, of course, there's other ways to do this. You can just select the tracks and hit D to duplicate them. It will use more CPU. That didn't actually make a whole lot of difference, so I'll select them again and then duplicate them. All right, so we've got about 10% CPU. I've got the 2-bits tracks times 4 in this project. So now we'll go back to settings. I'll turn off the experimental engine. And now I'm way up there to 34%. 34, 35%. So you could see that on this example that the new audio engine is way more efficient than the old one, or at least significantly more. To summarize this, the fundamental benefits of the new audio engine are correct plug-in delay compensation so that you can trust that everything should be in sync in any of the situations for any kind of routing. You also get better performance, meaning you can have more tracks in your project, more plugins, or more instruments, and the occurrence of dropouts happens at much higher CPU usage loads. With all of those benefits, why wouldn't you use the new audio engine? Well, the answer to that is that it's new, and it's newly released into the general market and user base. As the new engine is proven in the field, eventually it will transition to be the standard engine for Waveform. Now, as a final note, to aid the ongoing development of the audio engine and other features, if you go to the Maintenance tab, you'll see that there is the opportunity to send data to the developers in the background. You can send data on crashes, system information, and usage data, and these are really, really helpful to continue to tweak the system. You'll also notice that all the data is anonymous and can't be traced back to the user account, and they don't share any of this information. So the whole point is to make the app better. So I'd like to take a second to thank Dave Rowland at Traction for answering my questions about this so I could prepare this video. So with that, you should have a much better idea how to set up the new audio engine, how to test it, and what the benefits are. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in another video very soon.